Chapter 5 Indian School. Indian School? I stare at Pop. I'm so confused the words are spilling out of my mouth like water from a tipped bucket. Indian School? They teach you there how to be an Indian? Rather than giving me an answer, Pop starts laughing. So hard he throws his head back against the boxcar wall behind him. Bang! But it doesn't stop his laughing, even though he reaches up to rub where there's surely going to be a bump. Oh my, Pop says, getting enough breath back into his lungs to actually say something. Wouldn't my old teachers at Challaghey have a fit if they heard that? A school where they teach you how to be an Indian. Pop lets out a short laugh like a horse snorting. Then he shakes his head. Nope, son. You could not say that. It is au contraire, as they put it over in France. Just the opposite. Understand? I surely do not. But I am not about to say anything for fear it will start Pop off on another bout of laughing. I just do what I usually do when I have a question. I look at him and raise my left eyebrow. Pop smiles. It's not one of his happy smiles, but one that can be best described as rueful. Of course you don't understand, son. How could you after the way you've been raised thus far? Raised thus far? That provokes the desire in me to ask what in blue blazes that might mean, but I hold my tongue. Pop is going to explain those strange remarks of his. All I need to do is what he said his own father, a grandpa I never met, taught him. If you want to hear something, don't talk. So that is what I do. Or rather, do not do. Pop looks straight at me. That sad smile's gone from his face. Cal, he says. His voice so soft no one else in the boxcar but me can hear, especially those who turned their heads our way when Pop had that attack of guffawing. Cal, there's a lot of explaining I have to do. Your sainted mother and I agreed it was best to raise you like we did, but the time has come for me to explain a thing or two. I feel like I'm standing with my feet stuck in mud, with water rising around me, but even though I don't know what's going on, I can sense that my life is about to change. That scares me. Let me start, Pop says, by explaining what Indian school is. Okay? Okay. I reply, my throat so tight the word comes out as a hoarse whisper. There was a time, Pop says, when this United States was at war with the Indian tribes. You've been taught about that in school, right? I nod my head, remembering some of those stories. They told how this country was won from the savage Indian tribes who were the enemies of civilization and progress until they were all subdued, manifest destiny, how things were meant to be. But I'm also remembering how, when I came home and told my parents about what I'd learned about Indians, Mom would get a funny look on her face and Pop would say, there's more to it than that. Then he'd tell me other stories. How when the first white settlers came to America, they were helped by Wampanoags. How during the American Revolution, nobody would assist General Washington at Valley Forge till the Tuscaroras and Oneidas brought tons of food and saved his army from starving to death. How the 5 tribes of the South, the Cherokees, Choctaws, Chickasaws, Creeks, and Seminoles, became so much like their non-Indian neighbors with cattle herds and their own schools, even dressing like white people. But then they were driven off their land and sent on the Trail of Tears to Indian Territory. How every promise made between the United States and Indian tribes was always kept by the Indians and broken by the government. So even though I never met any real Indians, I grew up feeling different about them than the other kids in my classes. My thoughts of them were always friendly-like. Not that I said anything in class. Silent Cal was what I was called. But I did write an essay in 4th grade that led my teacher, Miss Nolan, to ask where I'd learned such things that were certainly not in any of my books. My Pop was all I said. It resulted in 2 things. First was my paper getting a big red F scrawled on top of it, along with the word ridiculous. Second was Pop paying her a visit after I brought that paper home. I was by his side when he walked into the school, a book under his arm. Both my parents had been invited, but it was one of those days Mom was too sick to leave the farm. I watched Miss Nolan greet him. There was a bigger smile on her face than I ever saw in our classroom. Mr. Black, she said, I am so pleased to meet a real-life war hero. Pop said nothing, just held the door open for her. I stayed in the hall on the bench where students always had to sit when parents had conferences with her. Pop nodded at me before he shut the door behind them. I heard the chairs scrape as they sat down, followed by a question from Miss Nolan. Now, where did your boy get those outlandish ideas? Pop started answering her then. His voice was so deep and low that I could not make out all the words, but I did hear clearly, when he paused now and then, was what Miss Nolan said and kept saying, "Oh." Just, "Oh." I began counting. She said that "oh" 14 times during the 20 minutes. By the hall clock. They were in there. Then there was a moment of silence before Miss Nolan came out of the room. She had the book Pop had been carrying in one hand and a handkerchief in the other. Her face was all red. She walked right past me without saying a word. Pop was close behind her. "Let's go," he said. That F got turned into a B. I can't say that Miss Nolan liked me after that. Matter of fact, she pretty much ignored me, which was fine by me, and a whole lot better than being called ridiculous in front of everyone. That memory takes no more than a heartbeat to go through my mind as I listen to what Pop is saying. "There came a time," Pop said, "when it was decided that fighting Indians and trying to just kill them off was not the best idea. Part of it was that some white people were sympathetic to what they called the plight of the Indian." Pop pauses. He looks up and to the left. That always means he is remembering something. He takes a breath. To be honest, though, it wasn't conscience that led the government to change its mind about what to do with Indians. Mostly, it was money. You know how much? I say nothing. Pop's asking this question just to set up his own answer to it. He presses his lips together. $1 million, he says. Per dead Indian. I cannot help but whistle at that. $1 million. More money than I've ever imagined. No working man could ever earn that much in 10 lifetimes, even at a whopping $2 an hour. So, Pop says, they figured it was a whole lot cheaper to send them to school and educate everything Indian out of them. First place was the school called Carlisle. Jim Thorpe went there, I blurt out. I can't help myself. Him being one of my biggest heroes. Like I mentioned earlier, I was even compared to him by my track coach in 5th grade before our school got shut down. Pop nods, yes he did. My father pauses for a second to look up and away, lost again in some recollection before he resumes. It was rough at a government Indian school, being taken from your family and shipped far away from home. First thing that happened after an Indian boy got off the train at Carlisle, and every other government Indian that came after it, was that they cut off the long hair that the Creator gave him. Then they dressed him in a uniform and taught him how to march like he was in the army. When the bugle sounded at 5 a.m, an hour before breakfast, he had to be up and out on the drill field. Just imagine a little kid holding one of those great big infield rifles from the Spanish-American War and going through close order drill. Pop holds up his hands as if he has a gun in them. "Attention, present arms, shoulder arms, forward, march," Pop's voice had gotten loud, barking out those commands like he really was on a drill field. It takes me back to one time when we were rolling through Kentucky. Pop and I had to hold a dark-skinned man named Lucius down. He thought he was back on some Belgian battlefield and was trying to jump out the door of the speeding boxcar. As he struggled, he was yelling out words in a language Pop later told me was French. Everyone in our boxcar cringes when Pop shouts out those commands. They're afraid he might get violent, as ex-doughboys sometimes do. The other beaus in the car may be thinking Pop is having some sort of episode like Lucius did. Some of the men who ride the rails, even men who did not serve, are real fragile in their heads. They can hurt themselves or others when they have an episode. Pop sighs and shakes his head. His voice drops down low again. Things were hard at Indian school. Idea was to get rid of everything in you that was Indian. Drill it out of you. Teach it out of you. Beat it out of you. Told you never ever speak Indian again. Punish you hard if you forgot. Uttered every one Indian word. Just saying or say would earn you a whipping or just 2 nights in the guardhouse. Ersky? Where did that word come from? A simple howdy do in the Creek language, Pop says, as if hearing my thought. Good word to know. Not as good, I suppose, as mutu. That means thanks in Creek. Muto. Muto, I think. Muto. I feel the word lodge itself in my head alongside of her ski. It's always been that way for me. Say a new word, and my brain just grabs it like a frog snagging a fly with its tongue. But now I have to ask. Jim Thorpe was Creek? No, Pop says, speaking real slow. I was.